Brilliant, gifted and innovative Syrian novelist Ghada al-Samman is highly respected in the Arab world as one of the most prolific female writers who has written over 40 works in a variety of genres including journalism, poetry, short stories and the novel. She has attained international fame as several of her works have been translated into several languages such as English, French, Italian, Spanish, Russian, Polish, German, Japanese and Persian. Al-Samman was born in Damascus in 1942 to a prominent Damascene family which worshipped knowledge and learning. Like her contemporary Nizar Qabbani, with whom she has a family relationship, she soon was faced with the conservative society in which she was raised and lived her early years. During her childhood, and because of such conservative milieu, she developed a rebellious attitude against old habits and beliefs. As a result, she became a strong, self-reliant woman who learned to endure harsh circumstances and sharply criticize them in her novels and short stories.
I labour just like any other man, and I am capable of supporting myself and my child just like any other citizen. I'm merely another Arab citizen who has the right and the obligation to do what he does best. It never occurred to me to give up writing after my marriage. Have you seen a man who submitted his resignation from work because he got married? If it were inevitable that you should view my status as an Arab female, all I can say is that my success is a victory for the Arab working woman, a confirmation of her existence as a revolutionary power, a force of positive reform.
From early on, Ghada al-Samman had been destined, it seems, to grow up in a house which is fond of literature. She has no vivid recollection of her mother, who died when she was a young child. She was raised by her father and grandmother, although it was her well-educated father who played the most critical role in her upbringing.
My father occupied my childhood, my father and his friends. I did not play a lot in my childhood. My relationship with the world of adults was always stronger than my relationship with my schoolmates. I don't clearly recall my social childhood. We lived in a small house. My father worked constantly and wrote, day and night. He tried to train me on asceticism and willpower. We would walk at dawn for 4 hours sometimes. With my father, I discovered the meaning of autumn in Damascus. I learned to love nature. He was poor but honest.
He was a university professor, a dean at University of Damascus, and a cabinet minister. She credits him for fostering within her an appreciation for both hard work and learning. All of that had its effects on her character and her literary works. She graduated from the Syrian University in 1963 with a BA in English literature and left to Beirut to earn her master's degree in theater from the American University of Beirut. She worked as a lecturer at the Faculty of Arts in the University of Damascus and worked briefly as a radio producer.
I have been a working woman since I was a university student. In addition to my studies, I worked as a library employee and an English teacher in a high school in Damascus. I have known economic independence since my adolescent years, and I have been working since, no matter what the circumstances.
She published her first book of short stories, Your Eyes Are My Destiny, in 1962, which was received reasonably well by readers and critics. Her later publications took her out of the tight range of feminist writing to a much wider social, humanist, and psychological space. In Beirut, she worked in journalism, and in 1965 she published her second collection of stories in Beirut, in which she then traveled around Europe working as a correspondent.
This was my motto when I arrived to Beirut that evening in early 1964 to pursue my master's degree in English literature after I had secured for myself a job in a high school to earn my living. My employment did not last for more than 1 month, for I quickly found out
for her as a writer and helped her shape new ideas as well as come to terms with many of her deep-rooted convictions.
I see in Beirut a screen that reflects the extent of Arab honesty and their ability to overcome their dilemma, and I repeat that the flourishing of the buds is a positive indicator for the possibility of growth of one Arab region.
Her contact with European culture ignited in her new literary interests and encouraged her to embrace a new form of individual freedom. She soon realized that living away from Arab homeland will not be sufficient to polish up her subjective mirror and deepen up her understanding of her society. Indeed, she realized that belonging is a reality and that her destiny was to return to an Arab country where she could feel home. In 1966, she published her third collection of short stories, Foreigners' Nights, reflecting her firm belief in social change. The 1967 An-Naksa had a shock effect on her as it did on many of her generation. This was evident in her famous article, I Carry My Shame to London, in which she reveals her deep sense of disappointment at the loss of the Arab dream of national independence. After that, she did not publish any books for 6 years, but her journalistic articles became closer to the social reality and made her very popular. The articles she wrote during that period became the source of some of her later publications. In the late 1960s, Ghada al-Samman married and had her only son, whom she named after one of her fictional heroes. She later made her own publishing house and republished most of her books. In 1973, she published her fourth collection of stories, The Departure of Old Ports, which was considered by some critics as one of the most important of her works. In this collection, she describes the dilemma of Arab intellectuals and the conflict between theory and practice in modern Arab thinking. Around the end of 1974, al-Samman published her first novel under the title Beirut 75. The novel describes the complex social problems in Beirut and opens with a prophecy by one of the characters of the novel, a fortune teller, who says, I see blood, I see a lot of blood. A few months later, the civil war broke out in Lebanon. In many of her works, al-Samman recounts how during the Lebanese civil war, she personally had to wait in long lines to get fresh water, to fill her car with gas, and to buy a loaf of bread. She also witnessed the daily destruction of streets and houses, and the death of tens of innocent people. She even tells how she trained to use a machine gun for self-protection. Out of such nightmarish circumstances, al-Samman developed a deep sense of alienation, pessimism, and ultimate nihilism, which stems from her existential attitude towards the world around her. According to al-Samman, her characters were doomed because they were trapped in a cycle of violence from which they cannot escape. And instead of finding hope and redemption, they become entangled in the socio-political turmoil of loss and hopelessness. After the publication of two more novels, Beirut Nightmares in 1977, which describes life in civil war-torn Beirut in the mid-70s, and The Eve of $1 Billion in 1986, she was often referred to as one of the most prominent modern Arab female writers. Despite her fame, al-Samman chose to be a recluse who shunned public life to communicate with friends through personal letters alone.
We have to be true to our ideals and dare to follow our principles to the end and be logical no matter what the price is.
It is believed that some of her letters reveal precious information about some prominent Arab writers and poets during the 1960s. For instance, in 1993, she caused an uproar in the literary arena when she published a collection of love letters written to her by the Palestinian writer Ghassan Kanafani in the 60s, when she had a love affair with him, which was no secret at the time. Despite her long absence from her native city Damascus, al-Samman never lost spiritual touch with her childhood paradise. In her book of poetry, Nostalgia Letters to Yasemin, she expresses her inner feelings of homesickness and yearning to be once again in Damascus, the city of jasmine and perfumed flowers. Last night, my memory told me to draw a lamp. I draw a city called Damascus. I did not draw it as a city emerging from the mirrors of the past or boxes of homesickness, but I did draw the desire of my future with her. Last night, I drew out my old window at An-Najma Square. I stood there to comb my hair. Being the symbol of the city, Jasmine will always stir in the poetess the feelings that her stay outside the fringes of the old city will envelop her with a total loss. al-Samman loses herself in her reverie and daydreaming as she enters into the worlds of her beloved city. In her prose, as well as in her poetry, al-Samman combines innovation with a captivating style that is simple and expressive. Through symbolism and allegory, al-Samman invents her own method of writing. Her use of the supernatural is most consistent. The deployment of the surreal succeeds through adopting the nightmare motif, which tends to deepen the gap between the mundane and the exotic. Most of her works end with a series of nightmares which seem to function as a release for madness. Her personal relationship with her works seems to be very unique indeed. She had established her own publishing house. She is one of the very few authors, Arab or otherwise, who collected and published her own interviews, letters and reflections on various subjects in a series of 14 volumes, calling them the Incomplete Works. In these texts, she reconstructs the story of her childhood and adulthood and presents it to the reader as she recalls it or wants it to be remembered. In most of her works, al-Samman focuses on love, death, cultural alienation, class consciousness, and even explores East-West cultural differences. Reading her books and short stories, one becomes vividly aware of the depth and intensity of her frustration and pessimism. Yet, Ghada al-Samman glorified love and celebrated the unity of the two lovers in a bed of absolute sincerity. Love is the passion which will uplift the human spirit to the highest mountains of innocence and nostalgia. Because you are like fog, you penetrate me. Because you are like fog, you penetrate me. I am filled with you, I don't know why. Because you are like the storm. I don't know when your fire or light will get on me. Because you are like the horizon. It's impossible to hug, own, or fence you. Because you are like the wind, my bells fear you. Because you are like the untamed water, my dams dread you. Because you are like the fevers of madness, you unleash my hallucinations. And because I am like you, I fear you. I love and hate you at once. I stare at the earthquakes of your whims like she who stares in a mirror. I whisper to you, hello and goodbye at once. You who lets me drink my own thirst till I am fulfilled. All these characteristics add charm and heighten interest and curiosity in such an amazing Syrian woman. This is why she stands out as one of the most influential female writers in the Arab world today, along with Colette Khoury, Nawal Saadawi, and Ahlam Mustaghanmi. In answering a question, who is Ghada al-Samman, she responds, I am an Arab woman from the desert. I am 2,000 years old. They have attempted to bury me alive in the desert but failed. They have killed me many times, and I would always rise from my ashes to fly and rise.